Hi, students. So this week we're doing something that I think is actually pretty complicated. And I'm trying to think of how best to handle it with you in a format where we are not face to face. The reason it's complicated is because this is the week that we get to Plato's Metaphysics. And metaphysics for the ancients is what you would call, I think, a natural theology, meaning for us in modern times, religion and rationality are often at odds. The philosophers of the ancient world thought there were things that you could rationally know that would show you something true about God. Their idea of God is not like the idea of God developed in a lot of the religions of the world, but they have an idea that the God is one, that it is good, that it is whole, and that it is provident, at least provident enough to create. And then, you know, that there may be different spheres of influence of other kinds of non-embodied beings. So none of that really comes up in your reading, but I wanted to give that to you as a background because I think it's important for understanding what is going on in the divided line. By the time you got to the end of last lesson, what you really should have been wondering is, and it's okay if you weren't wondering this, but is what is the philosopher supposed to study to come to these good conclusions? Okay, so you have this society set up, you have these different roles set up, you know how it's all working, and at the end the conclusion is that the one who can guide society is the one who can know what justice is. But then how do you know what justice is? And Socrates has described what justice is in different ways. And he's also described how you can be educated into justice, the way we've talked about taste and such, and habituation. But there's another step. And the other step is captured in the discussion of the divided line. Now, again, for us, we're normally materialists. We normally think that what exists is what we can see, and what we can't see doesn't exist, to oversimplify it. The divided line is based on the premise that there is a difference between the visible world and the, I think what the best word for it is, intelligible world, which can be grasped conceptually by our minds. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of walk us through it. I'm going to use share screen technology. I'm not the best tech person, so I hope it's okay. But I think that's probably the best way to go. So when you get to this point in the book, what you see is this sort of claim basically about how we have knowledge. And the first comparison is of the sun to the good that shines on the objects around us and makes them intelligible to us. That because we can see, because of the goodness of the sun, these things that are around us become tangible. Now, another way to ask the question of how we get knowledge is going to involve the divided line and this important concept called participation. Participation, not like, well, it is kind of like when you participate in something. But it's where you have this idea that something is taking part in something greater, and is sort of stemming from it or coming out of it, right? And so there's a continuity in things that are even kind of distinct. The other thing I want to say before I actually start getting into the image itself that I want to share is that you're going to see that you have like different levels of understanding. And for Plato, this is just natural. Not everybody is going to be able to get to the highest levels of understanding, of knowledge. But because of participation, if you can understand something lower on the line, you're understanding something that is true, not something that is false. You're understanding something that is true. So let me go ahead and with all of that, all of that introduction, share my screen. Okay. I am trying to do my best. Looks like I got it. Okay. Oh, I got it. This is the divided line. And the bottom is the lowest level. So I'm just going to walk us through it. And then I'm going to use an example to walk us through it. And then I'm going to talk about what the implications for politics are. The bottom half of the divided line is the visible. So only half of the divided line is something that everyone can see. The next half of the line is called not the invisible, but the intelligible, that you can understand them conceptually, abstractly, and that you're not understanding something imaginary. It's understandable, and there is some realness, some being to it. Being is a good place to start. So metaphysics in a lot of ways is a type of the study of being. And one of the ways that I think we can sort of just start to flesh out the picture is being will have sort of, we say something is, something was, something will be. What is the most complete version of that? Something that is. That means that it's happening right now. It is right now. Its fullness is right now. It's not growing or coming to be, and it's not passing away. It's not dying. The integrity of what it is, it is, okay? That permanence, that completeness, that wholeness that does not decay is what the highest part of the divided line is. So just remember that for now. Everything below that participates in being. It may come to be, it may pass away, but insofar as it's getting its strength from this high level of basically essence, this essence of being. And this essence of being for Plato exists in the mind of God. Now, let's go to the very bottom level. The way that the line is divided in your book that I gave you to buy, you might have different versions, so it might not have this in it, is between the sort of object and then the capacity. So what it is that we're talking about, and then what it is that the human uses to learn about that. So the bottom level is images. And this is a good example, I think, because an image, let's say that you have an image of a chair, right? And there are probably a number of ways that an image of a chair could look. And you can imagine when you see the image of the chair, what a real chair might look like in front of you. Imagination is the capacity that you use to understand images. A real image, a true image, is going to be an image that is in line with the divided line. And that'll make more sense as we keep going. The next level is the thing itself. So the chair, a chair, right? I'm sitting in a chair right now. You can't really see because I have a sweater on it. But this is a chair. I'm in it, right? You guys are probably sitting in a chair right now watching this. And you would think, I think, at least when I was reading Plato first, metaphysically, that's kind of where it stops. Okay, and this chair I can see it, I can sit in it, I can break it. It's not gonna last forever. I already broke one of these chairs, like the bottom, there was a dog that bit it, and so I lost a chair. Okay, right. So obviously this is not permanent, but it is here. And the capacity that you need to be able to do this is called trust. In Greek, pistis. Pistis is also the word used in the New Testament for faith, though there's of course going to be somewhat of a transformation there. But it means trust, not like as a hope, but a kind of, I guess, knowledge. By this time in your education, you've probably heard thought experiments like, what if we're living in the Matrix and like everything that we're experiencing is not real? Or what if we're kind of like just a brain in a vat and we're exposed to different conditions that seem to us to be real but are not? On this account, we have the capacity to understand that there is some being, some realness in these literal material things, this chair. The next step moves into the realm of the intelligible, which, remember, is basically what you can see with your mind. He calls these the mathematical objects. And the mathematical objects are, I think, our best way of understanding what that is would be to use geometry as an example. And remember, geometry was actually a very important part of the studying of the education system that Plato came up with. So there's only probably so many geometrical formations that a chair can have in terms of the angles of its legs, in terms of it's what sort of balance there has to be between its height and its width. There's parameters for that. There's a lot of different things you can do, but there's limits, right? So you can know that structurally it will have this geometric character. The way that we know this is using a capacity called thought. And this is dianoia. And it's maybe the best way to say it is just abstract thinking abstractly about concepts. Being able to talk about something that you can't see, but that you can understand and analyze and reflect on in your mind. Then we have the next step, the final step, the forms. And remember, these exist in the mind of God, the God of philosophy, which then in the Middle Ages changes a bit. But these forms, I think it's kind of hard to explain what they are. But my best shot is this. Like, let's pretend you and I were brand new humans in a brand new world. And we were plopped in different parts of the world. And we both had the desire to sit down, not on the floor. Wherever we are, wherever we live, there may be different materials that we can use, but conceptually, there is one concept of a chair that we would all come to. We'd come to something that has a seat, that has some sort of base, and that probably has some sort of back. And there are a number of ways that we could do that, but this is sort of the essence of what chairness is. And we could know that. Now, this example, walking through this, it falls apart a little bit here, but I'm going to try to correct that with the next example. So the capacity for this is called intellection. And intellection actually is best understood as, I guess, contemplation. If you've ever been in a state where you are just able to meditate or reflect, contemplate, it's almost beyond words, okay? That's called noesis. And it's almost like this communication of knowledge into you. This is not something most people can do, according to Plato. But this is what the philosopher can do. And this is how you can get to the purest essence of something. So let's take something more serious. Let's take, this is kind of maybe a silly example, but I think it might help to an extent. Let's say that we saw an image of Joan of Arc, for example, and it's a painting of her. So we learn about her, and because we're curious, and we read that she led an army, and she died when she was 19 because they thought she was a witch, and she was a literate peasant girl. So she has a lot of courage, right? And we can learn this in a real way by understanding images and the stories that come with images. Now, let's say we go to the next level and we actually would meet her in a time machine. Then we might get to see her bravery, right? Now go to the next level of the mathematical objects, and there are going to be, I think for us now, we would say that there's DNA, right? There's genetic sequencing instead of geometry, right? That is basically like the blueprint of what we are. Though I think Plato would want to have some sort of capacity for the human soul to be described there. And then you have the forms. And why I'm using this example is because in an image like her, and then in a person like her, so you could say that she existed as a form in the mind of God. But one of the things that a philosopher would do when looking at this would be able to reflect on courage, reflect on bravery, reflect on perseverance, right? And to learn what those things entail and to learn how to teach them to people and how to structure society to encourage that. Some people are not going to be able to get beyond the level of understanding this as more than a story, an image, a fiction, a fable. That's fine. As long as it's in line with the essence of what it really is. And actually in modern religions, you see this concept in a certain way, you know, that God is beyond depiction for many of the world's religions. And so there's this sense in which you either can't depict him or you do depict him, but you realize that there's a shortcoming. Now, what happens if you have a false image? What would a false image be? A false image would be a rendering of the form that doesn't render it right. So this is why when we were reading earlier in the book, he's so upset with these stories about Hera and Zeus. You know, Zeus comes down to earth and he rapes a woman. He's married to a sister. He's sleeping with a sister. You know, he has people killed that he doesn't like. And he talks at this point, Socrates does, about how this is basically telling stories of injustice, which then won't teach us justice, right? Some people are only going to be able to understand those stories that teach them about justice and not reflect on it more. This is what Plato's saying. And so if you have this bad image, this wrong image, you would call that image a lie. Now, to go back to the example of world's religions, would the religions of the world who just think that they can depict God in some way, would they say that their depiction is a lie? Because they all know, right? They're all premised on this idea that God is beyond what the human can capture. And they would say, no, this is the best rendering of what we have, of what we know, that is intelligible to us as humans, okay? And so that would be a true image. So you can have a false image, you can have a true image. And that's why myth matters so much. Myth isn't a lie. Myth is an attempt to bring down to earth something that is ineffable and capture it. And different people will be able to go deeper into that. This is one of the inherent claims that Plato's making. So everything that is on Earth has being, and it's going to participate in this line. You'll see something very similar when we get to Augustine. And so that's kind of the complex metaphysics that is happening there. I think that's probably enough of that. But you're welcome to follow up with questions. Without understanding that, you basically have in this book a story of a city that's supposed to know, but no description of how they know what they know, how they come to know what they know. And so this is the point where you find that out. And it will continue to be important for the rest of what we study.